Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. The purpose of this series of videos is to disrupt the church. To disrupt the church in a good way. Let me tell you a story that will help to illustrate this. Last year I was visiting the city of Boston to be with my family, with my daughter and son-in-law and our grandchildren, and we were taking a holiday. Boston actually is where I was born many years ago and where I lived during my university years. The end of those university years, I actually drove a taxi for a while. It was one of my jobs. And I had a job for one of the licensed medallion carrying Boston taxi cab companies. I drove at night, and every night I can remember, just about every night, one of our drivers was robbed. There were a lot of armed robberies of taxis in those days. You know, taxis were these cars with special paint, and they had the light on top, and they had the official medallion. You had to be registered. You had to be licensed with the company to be a driver. And it was all done in cash, and the robbers knew this, and so almost every night one of our drivers would be robbed, usually at gunpoint, and the cash would be taken. We learned to be very careful about where we picked people up and the destinations to which we agreed to take them. I can remember those days very clearly, but this was more than 50 years ago. Last year, as I said, I was there back in Boston with my grandchildren, and you know, there was not one taxi cab to be found. There were no taxis on the streets. But whenever we needed to go somewhere, since we didn't have a rented car most of the time, my son-in-law would just pull out his smartphone and tap an app like Uber or Lyft. And I can't remember waiting longer than 3, 4, possibly 5 minutes for a car to arrive. The cars that arrived were clean. The drivers were courteous. Everything was being tracked online. We knew where they were taking us, how they were taking us. It was all in the software. And more than that, since we were traveling with children, we needed larger cars. We needed child seats in the car, and all of that was pre-ordered on the app in a matter of seconds. And then 2 or 3 minutes later, one of these cars would arrive at the curb. No cash was used. We simply got in, went to the destination, got out, and the app registered that. It was charged to our credit card. We could add a tip and a review about the driver. So this was an incredible change. And as many of you know, of course, that was a disruption for the taxi industry. But the reason for the taxi industry was to provide reasonably priced and safe transportation for people who didn't have cars or didn't want to use their cars in the metropolitan area of Boston. And so, although it was a disruption when Uber and Lyft came onto the scene for the taxi companies, it was a huge benefit for the users of taxis and for thousands of new drivers who were able to use their own vehicles now to gain employment. You know, back in the day, 50 years ago, to have a taxi license, which was called a medallion, it cost a small fortune, and it had to be purchased from the city, and it was in the city's interest to have as few medallions as possible, because that kept the price of the medallion very high. It cost a small fortune to have a taxi medallion. And it was also in the interest of the large companies to have as few medallions as possible in the city, because that meant they had fewer competitors. And so large companies dominated the taxi market, and because it costs so much to get a medallion, if you wanted to have your own taxi company, people would save, for years, sometimes decades, to have enough money to be able to purchase a medallion from the city and go into business on their own. And then, of course, they had only a few taxis and only a few cars, and they had to compete against these big companies. All of that was disrupted. And certainly, there were people who lost money, and these companies probably went out of business. The company I worked for is probably gone by now, and I'm sure nothing's perfect. This is a worldly, this is an economic illustration, but it's what I mean when I talk about disruption in a good way. Now, the church is God's plan A for bringing his kingdom to earth. It is his chosen instrument to bring the kingdom of God to the people of the planet. And as far as I can see, God doesn't have a plan B. He's going to work through the church. And the church is a process of producing people who are spiritually mature and have the ability as disciples to be able to portray the kingdom of God and to have an influence. Their lives should have an impact on the people that know them best and on the people that they're around, the people that in their families, the people where they work, the people where they shop, and the people in their communities. And this is the function of the church. And frankly, in many cases, the church is falling far short of producing this kind of people as their product, as their finished result, as their fruit to go out and change society. The church, in many places, is deeply in need of disruption. So this channel is going to be committed to that, to bringing truth from the scriptures, truth from the Spirit of God to the people of God. And I hope that you're looking forward to future editions. I'm committed to doing this regularly and every few days, possibly every week, and to make sure that I can give you in just a few minutes some of the best teaching that you're going to need in order to progress in your calling as one of God's servants, one of his sons and daughters, and one of his disciples who are able to bring the kingdom of God to the earth.